21 November 2022, and in this Warrafak moment I want to talk about the sanctions. Well, there's lots of talks about sanctions, and we've heard that story over and over again. My own country was subjected to severe sanctions by the West, and the main drive behind those sanctions was to topple the white government. That was the mission. Why did they want to topple the white government? So that they can come into a country where the controls were in the hands of less capable people, and that will allow them to plunder. That's what they do everywhere. That's what the West do everywhere. The reality of sanctions is that by law, it is only the UN that can implement sanctions. But the Americans, they wipe their asses on things like that. They sanction everything in every place, wherever they want to. There's basically not a country in the world that is not under American sanctions. And that shit must stop. And Russia is putting a stop to it. With what Russia is doing currently, through the BRICS and through the relationships with the Asian countries and so, they're creating alternative payment methods, they're creating alternative banking messaging, all things like that, that allows countries that have been absolutely smothered by sanctions to suddenly come back and play a role on the international markets. And you must understand, the West is not going to like that, because they are used to getting their way. Do like we say, or we bomb you into pieces and we'll sanction you bankrupt. And that's what they've been doing. Look what they did to Venezuela. They smothered Venezuela. Venezuela sits on the largest oil reserves in the world. But the country is suffering because of American sanctions. Venezuela can't provide its crude oil to other parts of the world. And that must stop. And I'm glad to see that it is coming to an end, because some of these sanctions are absolutely crazy. The thing that gives me great pleasure is to see how the sanctions against Russia is backfiring and actually fucking the West up. The European economy, you can only laugh at what's going on there. Before our eyes, that rich society is going to turn into a third world. And all because they did it to themselves. They did it to themselves. Europe maintained a great lifestyle and lots of social support for medicals and things like that. This and that support from the government. And where did that money originate? All out of the decades of building their economies and their industries on cheap Russian gas. Now that days is over, and we'll see how they're going to get out of this mess. Now look at this. Wow, Netherlands has said enough is enough. They become the first European country to withdraw sanctions against Russia without permission from the EU. First example we see of an European country acting in the best interest of their own country. Who is next? Well, let's see how far they get before they're crazy, and that cabal in Brussels is on top of them. And then there's more from the Netherlands. Gas crisis has already caused 24 bakeries to fold. Due to the energy crisis in the Netherlands, about 20 bakeries have already been forced to close. New York Times writes about this with reference to the Netherlands Association of Bread and Confectionery Entrepreneurs. Bakery costs are reported to have increased by 80% due to the higher raw material and electricity prices. In addition, the number of customers has fallen. And that is more part of the backfire. But it seems to me that the politicians, they look and they see these things, but they feel nothing, because the people are taking the shots. And then you get this craziness. The head of the Ukrainian consulate in Milan has written to Italy's National Opera House urging it to cancel its season opening performance of Boris Godunov next month. Ukraine envoy misfires badly at La Scala. I cannot understand this. Ukraine is dictating to that whole of Europe what they should do and what they don't have to do and what they can skip and what not. And in the meantime, they're milking the European coffers dry and they are disarming the European nations. The public takes it. But look at this ridiculousness. And then we get to this woman. I don't know what in her mind, what she thinks who she is. How important is she? Anti-Russian sanctions may extend beyond the Ukraine crisis. Some of the anti-Russian sanctions that we were predicated on Ukraine crisis may remain in force until even after the conflict ends. Now listen to that. Who the fuck gives them the power to make decisions like this about the lives of other Indians? Who? And then we've got this. German state-controlled SEFE subsidiary cancelled 17 LNG shipments to GAIL, India, since May, which is a breach of the contractual agreements by Germany. This has resulted in Germany seized nationalized Russia's Gazprom Germania back in April and took control of SEF subsidiary. As a result, Russia imposed sanctions via prevention of sales of LNG cargo to their previously owned Gazprom Germania. SEF's Singaporean subsidiary said it can't fulfill its long-term LNG contract with GAIL and is paying a small penalty fee of 20% of the value of the contractual shipment, leaving a big gap for India's GAIL to cover to get LNG replacement. India's GAIL declined SEF's penalty fee for cancelled LNG cargoes. GAIL is consulting lawyers about arbitration. GAIL has a contract to receive 2.5 million tons of LNG a year until 2041, signed with the previously Gazprom Germania. And that's a lacquer backfire on Germany. They stole Russia's Gazprom assets, and now they sit with a problem. That Gazprom cannot supply on the contracts that they had with India. I like this. The West pushes Africa to buy expensive fertilizers to replace Russian supplies. Harvests in many parts of Africa are under threat as rising prices make fertilizers inaccessible to farmers. The West is pushing Africa to use more expensive European-produced fertilizers as anti-Russia sanctions make it difficult for Moscow to supply products to the continent. And what the fuck is that? And I've spoken about it in some of my Skidmarks. I think the last fertilizer plant in Europe closed down about 3 weeks ago. They can't operate without the Russian gas. They cannot. And that is where we are. And then the Belgian government sat on a moor of a shipment of fertilizers to Malawi. Apparently they've released that now. But look at the time. The planting season is almost over in Malawi. Now they send the fertilizer. This evil West is going to pay for all their shit. And then we listen to this guy. The EU to approve another package of sanctions against Iranian officials. Joseph Borrell, High Representative of the EU for Foreign Affairs and Security Policy. Package of sanctions against Iran. Why? Because Iran is supplying stuff to Russia and is trading with Russia. And this EU cannot handle that. Because how can Iran imagine to do business with Russia without the blessing of the EU? I think the rest of the world has decided, fuck the EU. And then there's more from this Borrell character. All those countries against whom sanctions have been imposed then retaliate. So did Russia, China and Iran. I believe this is a mistake, Borrell. Daddy, can I impose sanctions against Russia, China and Iran? And if they do the same against you, but they won't. But why will they do it against me? In fact, this is the paradigm in which European government continues to live. They can dish out sanctions left, right and center, but if anybody sanctions them back, then they are deeply disturbed and annoyed. And madness continues. Polish authorities ready to amend constitution in order to confiscate Russian gas assets. Earlier, Warsaw said it would seize assets of Russian energy giant Gazprom in the country, stepping up measures after imposing sanctions on Gazprom in September. I don't think the Europeans really understand what the fuck they are doing to themselves. Do they think, if by any chance in the future Russia would agree to supply them again with gas, Russia will invest in that? Not after all this theft of the Russian assets. But Russia is already working on a plan, and Turkey will become the gas hub, and the Europeans will have to deal with Erdogan. And then there's a little bit of sanity. The sanctions against Russia dissolve the unity of the EU states into thin air. They have boomeranged and hurt our economy in Europe far more than Putin. Stop now, use diplomacy. But will they listen to that advice? Definitely not. And then we get this from Czech. Legislators designate Russia state sponsor of terrorism. The lower house of the Czech parliament has designated the Russian government as a terrorist regime. The legislation cites Russia's retaliatory strikes against Ukrainian infrastructure after the deadly bombing of the Crimean Bridge. The resolution was supported by 129 out of 156 deputies present, while 13 abstained. Fact of the matter is, Ukraine blows up Russia's bridge. That's not terrorism. Russia retaliates. That is terrorism. And it is this duplicity that has contributed largely to the hell in which Europe is finding itself today. Do I feel sorry for the Europeans? No, I don't. Because all their pain and injuries is self-inflicted. I do have empathy with them, but that's where it ends. No sympathy. These people are panicking. They don't know how they're going to get ahead. Europe cannot exist in its current form without plundering third world countries for resources. And that plundering arms are being chopped off left, right and center. So, on this Monday, while I'm sitting here in load shedding, take note. Sanctions can backfire. And we see it now. Please give a like and a subscribe and share the thing. Thank you for your support.